What's up, everybody? This is Brian Davidson, and you are listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast brought to you by NIL Game Plan, your number one source for NIL news and, more importantly, education across all collegiate sports. Let's get after it. Today's guest is Rachel Maeng, a former athlete turned NIL strategist, helping athletes turn opportunity into real long-term value. She worked with athletes, brands, and collectives to build smart NIL strategies, not just quick deals, but sustainable personal brands. If you're navigating NIL as a parent, athlete, or coach, this is a conversation you'll want to hear. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Well, let's rewind to the beginning. Let's hear about your recruiting story and how you became a student athlete.
Yeah, so actually, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. Syracuse University is one of the better schools, top schools to have rowing programs. So all the local schools have rowing programs. I was lucky enough to have a lot of parents in the program who were willing to donate time and money to help us grow our program. And I ended up getting recruited to be on the high school team when I was, I think, in like eighth grade. I think at some point, a lot of Asians are actually coxswains, which is what I had as a position. And my school was less diverse. So I think I might have stuck out a little bit at first. But on top of it, I was probably a little bossy back then. So the high school coach recruited me to join the team. I joined the team. And then it was kind of it from there. I took the sport really seriously. I did a lot to get recruited. Back then, we didn't have any of the platforms we have now, but we had something called like Be Recruited, put my profile on there, reached out to coaches, ultimately had a few D1 offers, some D2, and decided to go to Rutgers.
Can you explain to the audience what you do in NIL today?
Yeah. So my background actually comes from originally front office sports and pro, collegiate, etc. And then I moved into the creator economy world, influencer marketing, brand deals. The purpose was always to learn the business from the experts, the influencers who are getting the deals, the brands who are the ones paying for them, and then understand all the information and all the steps that it takes to monetize yourself. And then I brought that back to NIL through my agency, Gen Agency. And then even today, I work with universities, I work with individual athletes, agencies, third parties to consult them on NIL, pretty specifically from like the institutional, the brand side, the business side of it.
And how's that evolved over time?
I think anyone that's in NIL always uses certain terms to describe what it's currently like. I think what's hard is that, NIL rules have changed so much. When it started in 2021 in July, the rules that were there are not the rules that are there now. We also have College Sports Commission. We have NIL Go. There's new rules being piled on every day. There's new technology. There's AI. And so it's a complicated space. I really think that the way that recruiting was back then, and even like how in the past couple of years athletes have monetized themselves, it's changed dramatically.
Rachel, you were very early to the party when you understood that this is a business and you treated your career as a business. What did you understand early on and what clicked that most athletes didn't get right away?
I think that a lot of athletes were trained to work at our sport so hard, to own it, to put everything in it. And I think that can lead to people having their identity as their sport. And I think a lot of people get lost in that and forget that there is not only a life outside of sports and after sports for everyone, including the percentage that go pro, but that there is a story that an audience wants to follow. That what you do as an athlete, being only the low percentage of athletes who actually get to college, they look at you almost like a superhero as a role model. And so you have a duty and a responsibility to be a good steward of the platform that you have. And I actually understood that in high school, funny enough. I was always really involved, like overachiever to the max, was in all the clubs and organizations. And then I did the same in college, was in our student government, was a representative to the university, and even now I'm a senator at my alma mater, Rutgers. And so I think I always approached it with the idea that my personal brand was both a representation of me, but had at least public facing, and as it was perceived, it had a business side to it too. So I always really tried to tie those two together.
And what were those first early steps that you took?
Yeah, I think in college, I actually went in, funny enough, like every other college athlete, I went in with a different major than what I came out with. I went pre-med biomedical engineering, did 2 years, and my coach and my advisor was like, hey, I think we should go in a different direction for a number of different reasons. One of them being that my heart really seemed like it was in advocacy, like it was in helping people. And so that led me to end up transitioning my career to economics and business administration. It also allowed me to then participate in more things outside of just my sport, like student government. I was on the executive board. I was able to work with our chancellor, our athletic director. I ran an event for introducing the athletic director, our new basketball coach, and our new football coach to the university. And so it allowed me to be able to participate in these other areas and understand really what I wanted to do post college and how I wanted to give back and help.
Do you have a point of view on student athletes actually forming LLCs in 16, 17 years old? Is that overkill or are they just thinking well ahead?
They're thinking well ahead. LLCs are just a business entity that protects you and your assets. So it's not as complicated and it's not as scary as it should seem to a lot of people. If you earn over $600, you should have an LLC as a contractor, a 1099, to get the money to write off expenses and things like that. So even as a high school athlete, all the gear that you're getting, the cameras, your iPhone, those things can all be written off. And so you can get benefits as a young athlete. And even as you go into a college, now you have an established business. If you tie in the personal branding, the social media, all targeting back towards that, towards your LLC or to your personal brand, you as an athlete, your social media, you're really tying it all together and actually treating yourself like a business, which is really what NIL is about, is marketing yourself, getting opportunities and looking at yourself like a business.
Perfect segue into talking about social and brand strategy. But let's talk about just starting out. What are some of the big mistakes you see high school student athletes making?
I think first and foremost, yes, recruiting and getting into college as an athlete is about the numbers. It's about, are you winning at certain races? Like, are you at camps or exposure events that get you in front of coaches? And obviously, in your bios, you should have your huddle profile or wherever your recruiting videos are and certain things like GPA, et cetera. But now that we're in this NIL era, they really want to know other things about you. When they work with an athlete, when they put you on your revenue sharing deal, you're going to be doing other things than just being an athlete. You are going to be advocating for the university. You're probably going to be going to alumni or donor events. So they need to know that you are a good brand and a brand safe that they can invest in. So on the influencer side perspective, it's really good to have something like a media kit or a pitch deck that explains a little bit more of who you are, maybe even explains and tracks your social media analytics, which is what brands look at, like follower count, where you live, how much engagement you get, which is how much people are clicking on your videos, forwarding them, saving them, etc. They want to know those other things about you. And then those monetization aspects, having them right on there allows a brand to not really have to go far to find that information and then reach out if you're a good fit. So yes, it's about the recruiting side, your huddle profile, your stats and everything that coaches are interested in. But there's now that other side that coaches, you can get recruited without any of this NIL experience or participation. But if you are interested in it, if you want to do it in college, and if you feel that you can do it in college, then starting out early and showcasing all those things is the best way to do it.
When working with an athlete and building their brand, how much attention do they pay to authenticity versus playing the algorithm versus worrying things like follower count?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, athletes should decide if they want to participate in NIL, specifically if they want to participate in the social media side, because there are a lot of athletes who still don't have social media to this day, don't want to be involved in it. It's consuming. Some parents don't want them to. So I think deciding if you want to go that route and understand that like your personal brand will now be public. And if you feel that that's going to lead to opportunities, again, whether that's recruiting, whether that's social media monetization, and the things that they should focus on is first building your brand, understanding your brand, establishing who you are and what is the community that you're speaking to. If you're an athlete, you can always talk about being an athlete, what it's like as a college athlete or a high level high school athlete, going to college, being recruited. You can talk about as a pro athlete, all the things that are strains mentally, physically, information that a community would want. And what you talk about and who you are really determines who that audience is. And as you keep creating content, you'll really hone in on who that audience is. And that's really when you start to increase your followers because people want to hear more of your story. You increase your engagement, which is what brands use to gauge if you would be a good add to their monetization strategies. Because if you have 100,000 followers, you have a 10% engagement rate. you have a pretty good amount of people who actually click on your posts and will want to buy things from you. So brands want to see that. And then the algorithms and things like that, there's always ways to play into them. There's definitely something to be said where you use trending content, like similar formats like carousels, infographics. And a lot of creators do participate in the dance trends and transitional trends, things like that. And they do help you. It's definitely a benefit, but it's not necessarily the only thing you should be doing.
Let's focus in a little bit on non revenue sports. So much of the conversation is still dominated by football and basketball, but there's a lot of non revenue sports, in particular, also female sports, that can take advantage of NIL opportunities. How do you counsel those type of athletes and how to take advantage of this process?
So actually, female athletes, first of all, a higher number of high school athletes go to college to play sports as a female. So it's 9%, which is more than the male standard. And then second to that, most of the NIL deals that are successful, that are compliant, that are continuous are with women. And this for a number of reasons. I think women being, at that age, a little bit more mature and better to understand all the rules and the compliance that goes into having brand deals, all the planning and time management that goes into doing that on top of school, on top of business. But even more so, women consume a lot more than men. There's a lot of guys out there where you ask them where their shirt's from, they say, "Oh, I don't know, my mom got it or my girlfriend got it for me." We're just consumers. So because of that, a lot of brands want to work with women who have a community that is active and wants to consume more of whatever this athlete is telling them to consume because they trust them. So I think as far as Olympic sports go, the athletes that are in rowing, which was my sport, field hockey, tennis, volleyball, all those sports are actually more popular quantity wise than football, basketball, etc. And so as an Olympic athlete, as you go into this monetization era and doing social media, you should really build up your social media and you should try to participate because there are actually more opportunities that are real opportunities and not like revenue sharing or pay for play. We're talking like real influencer business deals. There's actually more opportunities for women and also more opportunities for the non-revenue generating sports.
And outside of just building a brand, how should they think about NIL and how should they think about it differently than a typical football player or basketball player?
I think, now that we have the revenue sharing, obviously that's changed a lot of the conversation. There's only $20.5 million that a university can use towards building up their roster of athletes. A lot of schools, just to break it down, it's 10 to 15 million goes to football. Five or so goes to women's basketball or men's basketball, and whatever is left, whether that be 500,000 or less, goes to the rest of the athletes. So again, you already know it's not really a priority for them to get revenue share because a lot of the revenue again is generated by revenue generating sports like football, etc. But the other opportunities that they have I think are incredibly important. Being able to participate with other brands, being able to maybe do more community events or even be Ohio State volleyball player who had her own camp, gotten sponsors, and even wrote a book. I think those are the opportunities that we should start creating for ourselves as female athletes and as looking forward to in the future.
Let's talk about recruiting in NIL and as well as how family and coach fits into the equation. When should NIL start to enter that recruiting conversation? And can actually talking about NIL too early hurt your recruiting prospects if you handle it wrong?
So it's a different game now. Before there was no tampering, you couldn't talk to other schools, you couldn't enter the transfer portal without permission from your coach, and now you can. And obviously, there's waivers now, people play immediately. So it's a totally different game than it used to be. But with that being said, NIL is part of the conversation in recruiting. It's obviously a big topic. I've worked in recruiting departments at Rutgers. I've assisted in other programs. And a lot of the conversations that parents have because of NIL are how much money are you giving my athlete? How are you finding other opportunities for them outside of just revenue sharing? How are they helping the community? Things like that are already part of the conversation. It's things that recruiting coaches have to talk about. But I think where it starts to get messy is the whole revenue sharing era. They'll straight up ask you these college athletes will go and say, "Hey, I want $5 million." And if one school can't do it, but another school can, there's a higher likelihood that they go where the money is. And then, it kind of dives into like, is this the best school for you? Are there future opportunities? But in my opinion, that is part of the recruiting process. But I think another thing that people don't realize is like your name, image, likeness, that's just your brand. That's just yourself. Everything about you, the clothes you wear, your skin color, your hair color, what you think, what you do, everything is part of your personal brand. It's just your identity. And so your NIL is already in the conversation because you've been building yourself up and up as a personal brand to get recruited, to have a social media, to maybe already be getting deals, and even to garner a $10 million or $5 million, whatever salary that is, level at the collegiate side. So you're already in conversations with your NIL, already developing it. And so now that we're more aware that NIL is a part of recruiting and is a part of being a college athlete and even a pro if you want to continue on, it's already in the conversation.
Let's talk about the transfer portal a little bit. So much of recruiting and decision making can be tied up in dollar values. And to a lot of student athletes and families, they assume they'll just be able to jump in the transfer portal, find a better home if things don't work out at the first school. But one of the things that isn't usually factored into that thinking, particularly at the high school level when they're looking forward, is how much that can actually hurt your prospects for a degree. So it's hard to do over the recruiting process over and over and over again,
Hmm.
even if the NCAA allows you to. So can you talk about the importance of weighing academics still as a huge part of the value that you're getting from this once in a lifetime opportunity?
Yeah. It's definitely difficult if you transfer to get your credits, even going into from high school to college. A lot of athletes, a lot of people do AP. So those credits should transfer into college, but actually, a lot of colleges don't accept those credits. So sorry if you're banking on getting like all your freshman classes out the way. A lot of universities don't actually accept them because they don't think they're up to standard or some other sort of reason. So you won't get those straight off the bat. And then second, when you transfer, other universities again don't think that certain credits from certain schools are up to their standards in mathematics, in engineering, science, even communications, whatever major you're in, you may not always be able to transfer those credits. So that's lost time and lost work towards your degree that you're losing when you do transfer. So athletes can stay in college longer. That can make them have a fifth year. If you played all 4 years, you no longer get payment for your fifth year. You'll no longer have a scholarship. So you may graduate without a degree because you tried to transfer and you wasted all of your years of eligibility. Even going back to really, NIL and academics transferring, et cetera, over 60% of athletes from this last fall season were in the portal. That's first of all, that's an incredible amount of athletes in the portal. But if you think about it, there's incoming high school athletes that are wanting to be accepted. There's about 550,000 total athletes in the country. Half those athletes are in the portal, or just let's say even football, half those athletes are in the portal. You're forgetting about the incoming athletes that garner a lesser wage or maybe a higher wage, but garner a different opportunity for these colleges to invest in for the next 4 years or forever how much time they have. It's the economics of it. Like, does this university have enough money for you? Are there brand deals around there that you want to participate in? Are you even going to play at that school immediately, or are you going to have to sit out a year? Are your credits going to transfer into the school either from high school or from another college? There are so many things that can go wrong, or so many questions that you're going to have. It's hard. It's hard for parents and even just the athletes to wrap their head around it. Like, you can't predict the future, and you try to plan so hard both for your kids and even as an athlete, you try to plan out when you're going to graduate and you count down the days, but there's just so many variables in the space now. Really all you can do is try to make the best decisions, talk to a lot of experts, talk to accredited people, do a lot of research on your own, and have advisors for your athlete and even for yourself that are in the space and can help you answer this question.
You went there right away without me even having to ask, but I was going to say, how could families get ahead of this process? How can they get ahead of this numbers crunch? Because all of those issues that you said are only getting worse. It's getting tighter and tighter, and dollars are being stretched thinner and thinner as the top tends to consume a lot of the available dollars.
Yeah. I think starting early, if that's what an athlete wants to do, and I don't say parent, I say athlete, because the mental load is really on the athlete of them thinking about this all the time, of them thinking about when they should post, if they're representing their brand correctly, if they accidentally reposted a song with cussing in it. Like, there are so many things that go in on the front end. Then when you're getting recruited, you're scared to ask, well, am I getting part of the salary cap? Am I going to have this opportunity? And then the athletic part, is there going to be a spot for me on the team this year? Are you recruiting any other people in my position? Are you looking at the transfer portal? There's a lot of things that go into it. And I think, the best thing that you can do to be prepared again is just looking for that information, doing the research yourself. There's a lot of information out there from good sources like Forbes, Business Insider, On3, etc. Understand what your options are, what the playing field looks like. And then again, advisors. There are people who consult like me, and I am always happy to answer any questions that anyone has because I do think that the information in NIL is not as democratized as it should be right now. But beyond myself, there are people like Sam Green, Christy Dosh. There are companies like Greenfly. There are startups like Doculingo who use AI to parse documents and find out if they're safe, find different clauses that you wouldn't want in your contract because they give out your perpetual usage rights. So there are a lot of businesses and people in the space that want to be helpful. Definitely go towards the experts, but just make sure that the expert that you're talking to is someone who has credentials and is accredited wherever they need to be.
Score Act, executive orders, things are changing so quickly. Where do you think NIL is heading over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think, and I've always said this since NIL was a conversation, even back in 2018, when I was in school, it was a conversation. We knew it was coming. We just didn't know when. It was, something that had been on the mind. The Big Ten was already revenue sharing prior to 2021. So there are athletes getting money. As far as where it's going, I think that the NCAA is no longer going to be a thing. I think that is a widely shared thought among people in NIL and people who are, in the know of college athletics. I definitely think that College Sports Commission, whatever entity it may be, I think has to look at a collective bargaining agreement, has to look at unionizing the athletes because they are actually being paid via revenue share from the schools. They're being expected to do things. And so it really does encroach into that area of rights and representation. I also think that, and I say this because I'm a senator again at a university, so I do have access to fiscal budgets and I do understand university governance and opinions of staff and faculty and chancellors, et cetera. I think that there will be some sort of reckoning on the spending that we're doing in college sports. I think, it's astronomical amounts of money. Colleges go into debt, but that also raised the question about VC, about people buying into universities and things like that. So I think that is a potential because, you can't keep spending against a deficit, against a pot of money that you don't have. And so they're looking for other opportunities. VCs, et cetera, are looking to find out if they can make money in the space. And again, that's an area that you have to be really, really careful about, specifically in investing. And I think that eventually it'll level out. I think that athletes are going to find when they go into the portal, it is not a happy place. There's a good chance that if you go into the portal and you tell your coach you want to transfer, that they will give up your spot. If you don't find a home, you will not stay at that school. And then you don't have anywhere to play. You lose your scholarship. You lose everything. And so I think there's going to be a leveling out of people seeing the repercussions for their actions. And also on the other side, schools and brands, et cetera, realizing that athletes are getting more educated, they understand the space better, and there's more people trying to help.
Well, speaking of VC, the University of Kentucky has kind of gone in the opposite direction, and they've actually formed a nonprofit to sort of separate their athletic department from the larger university, which is certainly an interesting combination or at least development of things. Do you think that could be a trend across the country, or do you think that's maybe a one off?
Yeah, so Rutgers actually has a nonprofit entity to their overall athletic strategy. They did, and I say this because I'm their alma mater, they did just open Scarlet Knight Enterprises, which is more of a for profit entity that also helps in MMRs, ticketing, NIL, et cetera. And so in my opinion, that's the way that most schools are going to go first is that, yes, they can have a nonprofit, being because most of that $20.5 million revenue sharing, a lot of money that athletes receive is donor funded. So they're already getting the money in. Why have a collective, a totally different entity absorb money that could be going to the university and its athletes in other areas? But then second, the for-profit entities like Scarlet Knight Enterprises, those companies allow outside people to come in and work for the company to then have relationship with the universities. It allows for easier sales process with brands. And so I think that universities are going to get smart and almost create this like agency type ecosystem that the athletes and revenue generation departments sit in because it's all really tied in with each other. I think that, if an athlete gets an NIL deal, well, compliance has to know, but maybe their agent got it for them. But somebody has to have the contract that has to go to compliance, that has to be uploaded in NIL Go, that has to get approved, that somehow the NCAA sees. So there's just so many moving parts. I think as they keep going, I think a lot of colleges will start condensing them.
Sure. And in this world of no NCAA, is there no NIL Go? Is there no CSS? Are there no collectives?
Yeah, I think collectives as the nonprofit entity, I think it has never made sense because, again, you're asking donors and affiliated people of the university to give money to an outside entity that is taking a cut that will then give it to the athletes. So that's revenue loss. Why do that when you can just give to the athletic department who will then pay the athletes? So I think collectives are kind of out the window unless they're for profit, unless it's a donor that just wants to put the money in there. I think again, with the NCAA being gone, there needs to be some sort of governing body that has shared governance over the athletes. By that meaning like experts, compliance people, actual athletes, and former athletes, things like that. I think that's definitely going to be the way they're going to go. I think the CBA, again, is something that needs to happen. I don't know if NIL Go will be the portal. I think, we are in a world where everything is digital. So something needs to be digitized. We're big on CRMs. We're big on project management systems, Monday, Asana, Notion, et cetera. So there has to be some sort of digital trail to go over these documents and make sure that they're compliant and to even document processes anyways. And so that's where companies, I was saying DocuLingo before, and again, it's companies that can do these jobs a little bit quicker than maybe what the manual processes had been, or they can condense processes, they can track them better. I think there's always going to be innovation and technology that will move the NIL era and just, in general, technology move people forward. But who knows who's going to make it, if it's going to be Deloitte or how it's going to look.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today on NIL Spotlight. Is there anything else you want to leave the listeners about NIL or about what you do in the space that can help them move the ball forward and truly understand the opportunities ahead for them?
Yeah. I think, something that I've noticed on the brand space, and my agency worked with over 180 different brands, Fortune 500 companies. We launched campaigns from NerdWallet to Body Armor to Lay's, et cetera. And so something I've noticed in the brand space is that it's no longer about getting certain influencers who can come in and be, the big believer in the product, the face of it. It's about brands creating ecosystems that their audience and customers can live in. And I think that leads to 2 points. One being, if you're an athlete and you want to work with a brand, show up for that brand. Use it, show it in your profile, show and prove that you really are a user and a person in that community. It will attract an audience and it will attract a brand better because you're more authentic. And then second, I think athletes, as we've said, like our businesses have their own personal brand. They should treat their audience like their own ecosystem too. Like you live inside the audience of at Rachel Maeng. You're going to get education. It's going to come digitally. There's also going to be event opportunities. There's going to be, mentorship, et cetera. Like there is a world that your audience and customers should live in, that they know everything in there is approved by you, led by you, that they believe in you, they're trustworthy, like they're living in this little bubble around you. And so I think athletes need to start thinking about that, whether it's on social media or even in person. Just, what is your personal brand and how are you exuding it and how are you attracting new people to your community and how are you representing?
Rachel, thanks so much for joining us. Where can people find you on the web?
So my LinkedIn is just Rachel Maeng. The same for my Instagram portfolio. It is at RachelMaeng.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to visit nilgameplan.com to get started on your NIL journey for free. We'll see you next week.